the Tories in the polls at the moment, but is the greatest threat to Rishi Sunak and his hopes of re-election Richard Tice and the Reform UK party? Could he split votes on the right and gift number 10 to Labour? To debate this, I'm delighted to welcome former MEP and political commentator Godfrey Bloom. Hello, Godfrey.
Hello, Mark. Good evening to you.
Is there a danger that Richard Tice is so successful at diluting the Conservative vote, he hands the keys to Keir Starmer, which is bad news for everyone on the right?
Well, do forgive me for suggesting that political punditry, generally speaking, in this country comes from London and the southeast of England, who really don't understand anything, which is why they keep on getting their political punditry wrong, desperately wrong. I was a founder member of UKIP, and it was quite clear, almost from the very beginning, that the votes that we were taking weren't necessarily from disaffected Conservatives, but from what would be, you and I might know as old Labour. The danger of reform, if they get their act together, and I'm not sure that they have, is from old Labour. In 2003, the only campaign team I had was my mother-in-law, who was a disaffected Tory, a mate from the rugby club, and my dog, the border collie. And we went from 2003, and the elections in 2014, the European elections, we got 450,000 votes. So they weren't Conservative votes, Mark. Nobody in Yorkshire votes Conservative except in one or two or three constituencies. They were old Labour, massive old Labour, and they were voting for UKIP and me in huge numbers. So the danger actually of reform, if they get their act together, is not to the Conservatives per se, or they will get disaffected Tories, of course they will, because the Tories are so bad. It's the homeless working classes in this country who are politically homeless and can't vote for yet another idiot. What's the difference between Sunak and Starmer? What's the difference? And if people came out of London and visited the pubs and talked in the pubs, people would tell you what's the difference. And that's the game plan. It's an open goal for reform if they get it right, but I'm not sure they're getting it right.
Well, that's what I want to ask you, because as part of UKIP, you mentioned you are a founding member of UKIP. Your former colleague Nigel Farage quite literally changed the landscape of British politics. And really, he changed our constitution by helping to get Brexit across the line. It would never have happened without Nigel. Has Richard Tice got the chops to deliver that kind of transformation within Westminster? Is he in the gift? You know, has he got Nigel's talents? Is he charismatic? Is he the man to do it?
Look, Richard Tice clearly is a very nice guy whose heart is in the right place. Nigel Farage had charisma, but don't forget at the beginning he wasn't the leader of UKIP. He didn't become the leader of UKIP until a bit later. We must remember that. And, of course, Nigel did a fantastic job of putting UKIP on the map. It was already moving, and he moved it further and further forward. And that's great. And you need somebody with charisma to do that. But, of course, Nigel is slightly Marmite figure, as indeed I am myself. A lot of people love him, a lot of people hate him. But that doesn't matter in politics if you're trying to be the pivot of moving things around. But what I think Richard Tice and the Reform Party have to do is to be a lot more abrasive. Now, Nigel and I, who I ran things mainly in the north of England, admittedly, but he ran the party from the south of England, and it was good and it was successful. And we got all what we wanted. We got that. That was good. But you have to be quite focused and abrasive. And I don't know that the Reform Party have that in their manifesto. There's a couple of things that they need to do, which I think would actually swing it to give them a really big vote. But at the moment, they're not being quite definitive enough, particularly on matters like climate and immigration.
Oh, so would you suggest that even Reform UK are a bit woke themselves, which we know is a virus that has infected the Tory party systemically?
Well, yes, and it also it infiltrated UKIP towards the end, and we discussed that, I think, last year.
UKIP was woke.
Oh, it was drifting woke, certainly, yes. And I made that point. and I made that point. It used to be grassroots. What you saw was what you get. It was grassroots. And suddenly it was softly, softly catchy monkey when the whiff of ermine came in the way of UKIP and perhaps the occasional knighthood. Let me give you an example of that, if I may, Mark, just for a moment, very quickly. Immigration. Now, if you look at their manifesto, Reform are saying, yes, let's take them back to their point of embarkation. It's about number 4 on their list of things to do with immigration. Now, if I were the leader of Reform, I would be coming on TV and saying, I will mobilize the Royal Navy and the Royal Marines and we will tow them back. And I don't give a stuff what the French think, what the world thinks, what anybody thinks, what the left wing think. We're going to tow them back. Not let them come here into a hotel and try and streamline the procedure, because what we've got at the moment, which is fascinating, with the Home Office, are saying, hey, we've cracked this. We go and pick them up from the French coast virtually, bring them to a 4-star hotel, and we fast-track them to become British citizens. That isn't the answer to our immigration problem, all right? That's not the problem. And, of course, Richard Tice is on record as saying he's going to go with the Paris Accord on climate. And Trump's beginning now to look, if we may look across the water, President Trump, ex-President Trump, is beginning to say, look, just a minute, this climate thing is not real. It's fake science. It's a bit of a hoax. And if you go to the pubs in the provinces, everybody believes it. I'm talking to you from East Yorkshire. It is freezing, and it's been freezing for days. 30 years we've had to listen to this. And if Richard Tice came out and said, we've got 2 things, we're going to tow them back with the Royal Navy, and we're going to get rid of all this silly nonsense about climate hoax, and we're going to start sorting ourselves out, that would possibly give him a massive working class vote in the north of England. I don't hear that at the moment.
Godfrey Bloom, what is your view of the current strikes that have been threatened and indeed scheduled by nurses and the RMT Rail Union? The nurses on the 15th and 10th of December, and the RMT both sides of Christmas.
Well, it's fascinating, isn't it? Just leaving the rail strike aside for a moment, because that comes and goes, and I'm an old geezer now, I'm 73. I grew up with rail strikes. That's nothing new to me. But what is interesting is the nurses. Now, the Royal College of Nurses, who should be sticking up for nurses, aren't doing so. What they're saying is we want more money, more bills, more money, and all this kind of thing. But what they're not saying, what the Royal College of Nurses are saying, there are 1.2 million people employed by the NHS, less than half of whom now have any medical qualification. We have diversity officers. We have all sorts of administrators who are paid more than nurses. What the Royal College of Nursing should be saying to the government is, can you sack at least 400,000 of these freeloaders, get rid of them, and there'll be a lot more money for nurses and doctors and new hospitals that we need. But they're not saying that, just saying, gimme, 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 gimme. And most of the money that goes to the NHS is unaudited. We don't know where it goes. It disappears. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And this, going back to reform again, Mark, is what perhaps Richard Tice and Reform should be saying. Let's start massively sacking the people in the National Health Service who don't actually treat patients. They're sort of saying that, but it's not definitive. It's not loud enough.
Well, I'm delighted to say that we're joined now by an old friend of yours, Godfrey Bloom, because we have the legendary television journalist and reporter Michael Crick live in the studio. Godfrey. Can we pick up on the comments of Godfrey there, Michael Crick, in relation to those strikes? Do you think that the public will ever forgive nurses, for example, for downing their stethoscopes during a winter NHS crisis?
I think, actually, the public will be very sympathetic to nurses and, indeed, junior doctors who are also threatening to strike, because I think they recognise the extraordinary job that nurses do, and they recognise the fact that, like many people in all of the public sector, really, that for the last 12, 14 years, their pay in real terms has gone down. And there comes a point where it's actually very, very difficult for them to carry on being nurses. I mean, a lot of them will have ploughed huge amounts of money into their training and their, a lot of them go to university these days. There comes a point where they say, look, enough is enough. We've been having effectively pay cuts year after year after year at a time when the country wants more nurses, more people to work in the health service. I think that the public will at least initially be sympathetic. The problem is going to arise if you then get one or two people dying in the health service as a result of the fact that people have been on strike.
Well, that's a concern. Now, it's not an accident that we've brought both of you together, because I like to build bridges. Once I've sorted out this drama, I'll head to Northern Ireland and then the Middle East. Because, Michael Crick, I believe that you had something of a contretemps with Godfrey Bloom some time ago. Do you care to give your side of the story? What's your account of what happened, Michael?
Well, it was at a UKIP conference about 10 years ago now. I went up to Godfrey with the conference brochure, which had lots of little photographs of all, I think, the UKIP councillors from around the country. And I couldn't spot a single black face amongst them, or Asian face. And I put this point to Godfrey Bloom, and he got very, very angry with me. And he seized the conference brochure. I was making a very serious point, actually. And he bashed me over the head with it and accused me of being a racist. And it was on all the television bulletins, and it was live, actually, and then on all the television bulletins subsequently. And as a result of that, and some other comments that Godfrey had made that day, he was actually suspended from the party and told he couldn't stand for the European Parliament again. I think that's accurate, Godfrey, isn't it?
So, Godfrey, what's your side of the story? I'm going to be Judge Judy here today.
Well, first of all, good evening to you. We've had a few pints since then, you know.
We have, actually, yeah, we have.
Pints of blood by the sounds of it.
Look, there's only one thing I would say. The reason I got a bit spiky about it was I've always believed, and I've believed since I was a very young man, skin colour should have no impact whatsoever on anybody's views whatsoever. And if you hold a brooch up and start pointing out who's got a brown face, who's got a black face, who's got a white face, I get a bit angry. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a meritocrat, and I don't care what colour skin you are. It doesn't bother me. And I don't really think it probably bothers Michael Crick, but he had a point to make because he's in show business as well.
Michael, you have probably faced worse adversaries than Godfrey Bloom, but I can't imagine it was fun to be clubbed over the head or neck. About the neck and face.
To be honest, it was pretty mild. Many television reporters have suffered much worse.
Did any of the ink from the UKIP brochure go onto your face, onto your skin at all? Any of the slogans?
Not that I'm aware of.
In
fact, the next day I went
Control immigration.
No, the next day I went
Save the pound.
The next day I went to the UKIP conference. And people wanted to, and they wanted me to autograph their brochures, and they wanted to autograph my brochure, and it would cause quite a stir, actually.
It caused a stir, and it was a big story for both of you. Godfrey, I'm going to reserve judgment, but would you like to offer Michael a tiny apology?
No, we've had a few beers since then, and we're perfectly all right with each other. It's not an issue. I tell you what, though, just for a bit of a laugh, up here in Yorkshire, let me tell you, I couldn't buy a drink in any pub in Yorkshire. People were coming up and thought it was a huge joke and bought me a drink. And I think Michael takes it in the same.
There we are. And Godfrey, following the royal protocol, never apologise and never explain. Thanks, gentlemen, for being a great sport in relation to that drama 10 years ago. And it's good that we're all here still to tell the tale. Godfrey, do join us soon. It's been a brilliant conversation. Founding member of UKIP, political commentator, entrepreneur, you name it, Godfrey Bloom. And, of course, we've heard from Michael Crick. We'll talk to Michael after this.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research-based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.